As Matt said, we're starting a new series called From Exile, Resurrection in the Ruins. If that sounds both hopeful and unsettling, that's good. That's the tension that we're living in. Beginning in 609 BC, the southern kingdom of Israel, called Judea, experienced a series of escalating conquests and forced exiles at the hands of the Babylonian Empire. This culminated in 586 BC when Babylon returned and completely destroyed the city walls, the city of Jerusalem, including the temple, and a large number of the remaining Jewish people were exiled to Babylon. This experience completely reshaped the people of God's understanding and view of the world. It fundamentally reshaped the stories and scriptures that they brought with them, so much so that throughout the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, the primary metaphor for death and resurrection is exile and return. So in this series, we're going to be exploring the return from exile. We're going to be exploring what happens after resurrection. We're coming out of Lent, where we focused on the challenging and trying and stretching desert seasons of life. It's fitting that it's so rainy today as we're moving out of the desert. But if we're honest, the weirdest part of a desert season isn't always when you're in it. It's sometimes when you start to leave it. Because the exhaustion that you've gotten used to, the mindset that's helped you survive, that version of yourself that has held it all together, what do you do with all of that once it's time to come home? That's what we're going to be stepping into tonight. What we're talking about isn't a return to normal. This is the strange, brave work of stepping back into life, changed. Maybe a bit uncertain, but with our eyes on the horizon looking forward. We're going to start tonight in Luke 24, in a story that takes place the day of Jesus' resurrection. This is Luke 24, starting at verse 13. That same day, two of them were walking to the village Emmaus, about 7 miles out of Jerusalem. They were deep in conversation, going over all the things that had happened. In the middle of their talk and questions, Jesus came up and walked along with them, but they were not able to recognize who he was. He asked, "What's this you're discussing so intently as you walk along?" They just stood there, long-faced, like they had lost their best friend. Then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happened during the last few days?" He said, "What has happened?" They said, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene. He was a man of God, a prophet, dynamic in work and word, blessed by both God and all the people. Then our high priests and leaders betrayed him, got him sentenced to death and crucified him. And we had our hopes that he was the one about to deliver Israel. And it is now the third day since this has happened. But now some of our women have us completely confused. Early this morning they were at the tomb and they couldn't find his body. They came back with the story that they had seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of our friends went off to the tomb to check and found it empty, just as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus." Then he said to them, "So thick-headed, so slow-hearted. Why can't you simply believe all that the prophets said? Don't you see that these things had to happen, that the Messiah had to suffer and only then enter into his glory?" Then he started at the beginning with the books of Moses and went on through all the prophets, pointing out everything in the scriptures that referred to him. They came to the edge of the village where they were headed. He acted as if he were going on, but they pressed him, "Stay and have supper with us. It's nearly evening, the day is done." So he went in with them, and here's what happened. He sat down at the table with them. Taking the bread, he blessed and broke and gave it to them. At that moment, wide-eyed, they recognized him. And then he disappeared. Back and forth they talked. "Didn't we feel on fire as he conversed with us on the road, as he opened up the scriptures for us?" They didn't waste a minute. They were up and... Mac, would you grab me some water? Thank you. Woo! They were up and on their way back to Jerusalem. They found the 11, their friends gathered together, talking away. "It's really happened. The master has been raised up. Simon saw him." Then the two went over everything that had happened on the road and how they recognized him when he broke the bread. Professionals know not to clear their throat into the microphone, the thing that I just did, but it's fine. We're good. Okay, so in this story, The two disciples are walking away from Jerusalem to this town called Emmaus. This is Easter Sunday. The resurrection has already happened, and yet in this story, thank you. There we go. The resurrection's already happened, but in this story, there's no angel choir, right? There's no earthquake. There's no dazzling moment. It's just two disappointed people walking a road, and then Jesus quietly joining them. But they don't know how to live into that reality yet, that Jesus is with them. So they do the only thing that they know how to do. Not the only thing they know how to do, the only thing they can think to do in their grief, which is just walk. Not toward hope, not toward a plan, just away. Away from everything that used to make sense. Sometimes walking is the only move you've got left. Not because you know where you're going, but because standing still feels worse. They walk away from the city, away from the chaos, away from the story, and on the road, a stranger joins them there. Honestly, this is like kind of the most understated and Jesus move ever. Like he's risen from the dead, and instead of crashing the temple or performing some miracle, he's just like, let me eavesdrop on you for a few miles. And they don't recognize him, which is so mysterious and so wild. Like how do you not recognize the guy that you've been following around for years? But also, if you have been in the midst of deep grief, you understand this. Like I've missed the obvious things right in front of my face more times than I care to admit, especially when grief is driving the ship. But their inability to recognize Jesus isn't just the effect of emotional turmoil, right? Like cognitively, this checks out. Our brains are wired to expect what's familiar. When something violates that, especially like something as jarring as resurrection, it can take some time for our perception to catch up. So you can be looking at new life in front of you and still see loss, still feel lost. That's not faithlessness, that's just how human recognition works. And notice this, Jesus doesn't force the moment on them at all. He walks with them, he listens, he lets them talk out their disappointment. And eventually they reach the edge of the town. And Jesus acts like he's going to keep walking. That's the thing about resurrection. It doesn't hijack your story. Jesus walks with them, but he doesn't drag them forward. There's no miracle to force belief, just his presence. And sometimes that's more difficult because it means that you have to decide if you want to keep walking. But then we get this hinge in the story where they urge him to stay. That's the turning point. It's not on the road. It's not on the walk. It's not even when Jesus is explaining the scriptures to them. They didn't get it when he opened the scriptures. They didn't get it when their hearts burned within them, they said. They get it when they extend an invitation to him, stay with us. Jesus accepts, they sit down, and in that ordinary act, breaking bread, their eyes are opened. They recognize him. That's the hinge of the whole story. Not a sermon, not the signs, but the shared table. They make space, and in that space, they meet resurrection. But it doesn't stop there. Because once they see him, once they know, it moves them, it compels them. They get up and they go. They return to the place that they just left, 7 miles away, but this time with a new story. That's the rhythm here. Receive and respond. First the invitation, then the movement. Agency begins with making space, and is fulfilled by what we choose to do next. I think this is what resurrection does. It restores your agency, not by solving everything, but by giving you a reason to act, a reason to return. It doesn't remove your questions, it just gives you a better story to carry with them. So they rise, they go back, they walk to the same city, but now they're different. Resurrection doesn't drag them forward, it invites them to move toward life, to bring what you've seen back to others, to go back to the places that you thought you'd left behind, carrying a new story, even if you're still catching your breath. And that's true not just for individuals, but true for entire communities too. Like resurrection, returning from exile isn't just a location change. It's a calling to rediscover who you are and what you stand for. It's the invitation to say, let's build something here. Let's make a home again. And that's where a guy named Ezra's story begins. We're going to take a look at the book of Ezra, which is near the end of the Old Testament. This book picks up in the midst of a moment of incredible tension. In 539 BC, after 70 years from the start of exile, after Jerusalem has been destroyed, the temple has been leveled, and God's people have been scattered, Cyrus, the king of Persia, who has taken over Babylon, issues a decree that exiles can return home and rebuild. Ezra is a priest and a scribe. He becomes one of the key figures of guiding this return back to Jerusalem. And the book named after him reads part like historical record, but part like his journal. It doesn't just document the logistics of coming back. It captures the emotional and theological weight of trying to rebuild a life with God after everything has fallen apart. But one of the most interesting things is this return from exile isn't mandated. This isn't like forced upon anyone. It's an invitation. After decades of displacement, that kind of invitation would have felt both thrilling and terrifying. Imagine hearing the words, "You can go home," after 70 years. 70 years. It may not sound like a lot, but think about that. Like even today, that's essentially a lifetime. That was even more the case in 539 BC when the average lifespan was 30 to 40 years. Most everyone who had experienced the exile has died. Anyone born even 30 years into exile has likely died. The people returning are at best second-generation exiles, if not third or fourth. They'd heard about their homeland from their parents or their grandparents, but they'd never experienced it, and now they're finally being told, you can go home. What would that be like? It's like being told that you can go reclaim your great-grandparents' house in a country that you've never been to. For some, it probably didn't feel real. For others, it probably stirred grief more than hope, because what even is home now? What are they returning to? Ezra 1:1-5 says this: In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also to put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Then the family heads of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. I love that phrase, everyone whose heart God had moved and prepared to go up and rebuild. It's only the hearts that God had moved. Only the people waking up to hope again who are able to take this on, this return from exile. Neuroscience actually backs this up. When your attention is drawn toward hope again, it begins to reshape what's possible in your own mind. The soul moves and then the brain follows. But not everyone's heart is stirred. Not everyone felt ready to leave Babylon. For many, Babylon was no longer exile. It was home. It was the only home they had known. It's where they grew up. It's where their kids were growing up. It's where their lives had found some stability again. Returning would mean uncertainty. It would mean risk. Starting over in a land that they have no direct memories of and no experiential connection to. In order to return, you need more than permission. You need vision. You need imagination. You had to believe that something new could be built, right? Not a replica of what was, not going back to a past that you never experienced, but a future that you couldn't fully see yet. Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann writes this: "The return from exile is not a return to what was. It is the embrace of a new future shaped by hope and sustained by memory." I think that's the courage of rebuilding. And that's where Ezra's leadership really matters. Like, after years of fragmentation and identity drift, the people don't just need a builder. They need someone to remind them of who they are. He's not a project manager. He's a priest and a scribe. He's the one that will help them remember. He holds the shape of the story when the people themselves have forgotten. He's the one who will teach them how to be the people of God again. The work of returning isn't just practical, it's deeply spiritual, and we see that in Ezra. And some of us are right there right now. We're called to return, but we're unsure how to rebuild among the ruins. Because not everyone goes, not everyone feels ready. Some stay, some leave, some rebuild, some don't. Resurrection doesn't force your hand, it opens a door. And then it asks, do you want to live again? The people who left Jerusalem in exile weren't the same as the ones who returned. Most, if not all of them, had never seen the city that they were returning to, like I said. They came back with scars, with questions. They came back speaking a completely new language. And they came back with memories that they couldn't quite explain. I remember a friend who returned to church after like a decade away, and she said it felt like walking into someone else's home and realizing it used to be yours. The place hadn't changed, but she had. And that made everything feel unfamiliar and sacred all at once. Sometimes you return to a place that was once sacred and it feels foreign. Not because God isn't there, but because you've changed. The way you experience the familiar will never be the same. Resurrection disrupts our spiritual muscle memory. This is what we often call liminal space, that threshold between what was and what will be. It's sacred, but it's also confusing. You're not who you were, and you're not yet who you're becoming. And that in-between space is confusing, but it's where transformation takes root. And what about when everyone returns changed? Like, that's its own challenge. Imagine rebuilding a life together when no one's quite sure who we all are anymore. That's that post-exile moment. That's the post-resurrection moment. That's us. Same with the disciples on the road. They followed Jesus. They loved him. And then they lost him. And now they're being asked without warning to live like death doesn't get the final word. That's not just good news. That's extremely disruptive news. Because if resurrection's real, then we don't get to cling to who we were before. We get to return, but we return changed. Sometimes it's easier to stay in exile, to stay in the story where we know how to survive. Coming home is scarier than staying away, especially when you're not sure who you'll be when you get there, or if you'll even be received. Because return doesn't just challenge you, it challenges the people that you're returning to. Will they welcome the person that you've become? Will they see you clearly, or only as who you were? But with these questions comes grace. Again, Jesus doesn't rush us. He just walks with us until we're ready to invite him in. And when we do, everything starts to shift. The disciples' story doesn't end in Emmaus. The people of Judea's story doesn't end in Babylon. Both go back to Jerusalem with new eyes and new understanding and a new message. That's what return looks like, not a rewind, but a re-entry. So what do we do with this? We've been talking about resurrection as a return, but not a return to normal, a return to life, to risk, to hope, to the work of rebuilding something that doesn't exist yet. That takes intention and it takes rhythm. So every week in this series, we're going to be talking about some small doable practice, a resurrection habit to help us move forward together. And this week's habit is really simple, but I really believe it matters, and it's simply name your return. Take 10 minutes this week on a walk or in a journal or with someone that you trust and just ask, where am I being invited to return? What part of me is being called back to life? It might be a friendship, maybe a creative instinct that you sort of lost touch with, a spiritual practice, a dream that you have let go of while in survival mode, a part of yourself that got lost in the last hard season that you've been through. For instance, I'm in a season right now where I'm being invited to return to hope, to be able to hope again. And I am growing in that, but I don't know how to trust it quite yet. But that's the kind of return that we're naming. It's not perfection. It's just naming a direction that we're moving in. This is what we see the disciples do in their own way. They name what they want. They say to Jesus, stay with us. And that small act of clarity opens the door to resurrection. And if nothing comes to mind this week yet, that's okay. Like maybe this week is just about listening, watching, waiting for that subtle nudge to your heart. You're not naming it to force a comeback. You're naming it to recognize movement. You're naming it to name your intention. You're naming it to say, this still matters and I might not be there yet, but I'm listening. And this is where I want to go. Because resurrection doesn't always look like a miracle. Sometimes it looks like deciding to show up again. Jesus shows up on the road and accepts an invitation to stay. Ezra begins with an invitation to return. And both stories hinge on a decision, not just to believe, but to move. So will you walk toward life again? Not perfectly, not all at once, but with honesty, with courage, and with a heart that's been moved. Because as we talked about a few weeks ago, the tomb is empty. The exile is ending, and resurrection always leads us somewhere. And that's kind of where we are collectively together right now, too. As I said, we're going to be moving out of this space later this year, which is both exciting and uncomfortable. But we know resurrection and rebuilding often starts with disruption, with movement, with reimagining what home can be. And the rebuild of any community, of any life, starts with people willing to return, not just physically, but spiritually and communally. So what if we individually together took the first step tonight? Not a giant leap, just that next step. That next step of naming your return. Maybe it's walking a different road this week. Maybe it's saying, stay with us even when you don't feel ready. Or when the introvert inside of you is screaming, everyone go away. The bottom line is this: coming home isn't going back. It's choosing to move forward. It's choosing life. May we be people who choose to walk forward together. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for the end of hard seasons. Thank you for new risks and new challenges. God, I pray that you would give us eyes to see the beautiful things that don't exist yet, that you're inviting us to be a part of building. In our lives individually and together as a community, may you continue to lead us down the road. May we accept the invitation to return, not to get back to what was, but to build something new as people deeply changed by you. God, we love you. Thank you for these stories that help remind us to keep our eyes on the horizon. We love you, God. Amen.